Nick Bailey with Brian Nelson Jr. Brian, it's good to be back with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. I'm waiting for spring.
I think we have a little bit of time for that. As it snowed again on March 30th, and full-blown snow and hail, like sleet storm today.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
But tomorrow's supposed to be 60.
There you go. And then it'll snow again.
Yes.
Hey, listen, you are really good at bringing us some of the classic television stars that we watched growing up because our parents watched those shows, and then they got us into them, and today is no exception. So I had nothing to do with this booking and loved every minute of this interview. So tell us who you brought this week.
Well, I got Jon Provost. I ran into him at the Leave It to Beaver cast reunion in Gallatin, Tennessee this past November. And I got to not sit down, but stand around and talk during some dead time. I spent both of the days there, got to talk to Jon a little bit. He kind of gave me a lot of the information that we talked about today in our interview. But, yeah, it was fun. So I asked him to do an interview, and he was more than happy to do it. His wife was actually the organizer of that reunion, and she's a well-known author as well. She's Lori Jacobson, and she's got a few books, one notably on the Beatles, which is kind of cool. And yeah, it was really neat. So
so when we did this interview, which we just ended moments ago, do you think he remembered you from that event?
You know what?
Because I couldn't tell. I didn't know that you had previous conversations and that you had even met him. So going into it, that wasn't obvious, but do you think he remembered you?
I think he did remember me. There was no real way to kind of sneak that in there, but I do know that he did remember me because I've been in communication with them in the last couple of months getting this interview set up. So
nice.
Yeah.
No,
Real cool guy.
Brian's in the know.
Yeah.
He knows people.
Yeah. It was really fun talking to him.
Cool. All right. So here's our conversation with Jon Provost. Enjoy.
Hello, Jon.
Hello. Hi.
How did the audition process work with you going on to Lassie?
Well, actually, I really didn't have to audition for the part for Lassie. I was filming a movie for RKO in Japan. This is 1956, and Tommy Reddick he'd played Jeff on Lassie for 3 years, and I think Tommy was like 14 or 17, and he just wanted out. So they were looking for a much younger child to not take over his part, to be, the new part of the character of Timmy. And they had looked for kids all over. I mean, they went to all the big cities and interviewed. Couldn't find the kid they were looking for. So the producer's wife of Lassie and the producer's wife of the movie that I was doing in Japan were having lunch. And it came up that, we're looking for this kid and can't find him. And the other woman says, well, describe him. And she did. And she said, well, that sounds exactly like the young boy, Jon Provost, who's filming a movie in Japan right now. So they did some research and looked at some, the other movies that I'd done previously, so they knew I could act, and they said, yes, he is the boy we want. So when we got back from Japan, went to the studio, met with the producers and a couple directors, and they said, okay, we want you for the part of Timmy, but how do you get along with big dogs? And I guess, the other kids had not worked out, but at any rate, I was fine with animals. I'd been raised with animals. Actually, at the time, I had a pony, and my sister had a horse. We had a goat. We lived out in the country in San Bernardino, and so it wasn't a problem for me. But they had to see how Lassie and I would react together. So I went and spent a long weekend with Red Weatherwax, the owner of Lassie, on his ranch. He had a 60-acre ranch out in the San Fernando Valley. And so on the following Monday, Lassie and I and everybody came back to the studio, and we walked in to the office, and Lassie gave me 2 paws up, and that was my only audition. So it was a little different than what you were probably expecting to hear.
Well, no, actually, that's kind of funny. I was gonna say, I think if especially I'm finding that there's been a couple actors who've been cast in a way that you would never believe. Like Jerry Mathers, he was cast because it had nothing to do with his audition at all in his interviews. He just wanted to go to a Cub Scout meeting, and that was it. And so they said that's the guy. Now,
okay,
and then the same thing. Janice Kent, she was the last one they saw, and that's the one we want. And I believe Kip Marcus, who played in the new Leave It to Beaver, played Beaver's son. Same thing. It was like he was one of the last ones seen, and he's our guy. So I guess you need to be the last guy.
Yeah, well, I'm just a real believer, in being at the right place at the right time. Cool. Now, can I tell you my very first audition? Because this one is very unusual.
Absolutely.
Okay, my mother came from Texas. She was raised in a small town in Texas. And growing up, her idol was Jane Wyman, the actress. So Mom moved to Southern California, met my father, who was from Mobile, Alabama. They got married, and Mom became a housewife and had 3 children, of which I was the youngest. And one day, she was reading the L.A. Times, and in a column, it said that Warner Brothers was looking for a blonde 2 to 3-year-old boy to play Jane Wyman's son. Well, we didn't even live in Hollywood. We were living in Pasadena at the time. And Mom thought if she took me on this audition, she was going to meet Jane Wyman and get her autograph.
Oh, how cool. Yeah.
Seriously, guys, serious. That was the only reason. And so Dad, who was an aeronautical engineer, when he came home, Mom said, honey, I'm going to take John, and I'm going to get an autograph, but you have to draw me a map, show me how to get to Warner Brothers. It's somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. So Dad, he complied. He told Mom, I think you're a little bit, out of your mind, but okay. So long story short, Mom takes me, and there are over 200. It was what they called a cattle call.
Yeah,
there were over 200 little boys and little girls whose moms had cut their hair to look like a little boy.
Oh, no.
We're talking 2.5, 3-year-old children.
Right.
So it starts. Now, I don't remember this because I was so young, but what they would do was they'd take 3 or 4 of us into a room without our mother, and say, okay, walk up to this woman and say, oh, hi, Mommy, or walk up to this man and say, hi, Daddy. Well, a lot of the kids, they'd freak out. They wouldn't do it.
Right,
yeah.
And so out they went. Well, evidently I did what I was told, so they kept taking me out and telling my mother, don't leave. We're auditioning more children. So we were there like almost all day, and towards the end of the day, this woman, a big, flamboyant woman, comes over to my mother and says, ma'am, I think your son is going to get this job, but we need to know who your agent is. And Mom said, well, wait a minute, I want to get Jane Wyman's autograph, and, we own a home. We don't need an agent. All right, you got it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the woman, she steps back and she says, no, you don't understand. A theatrical agent, because if your son gets this job, he needs a representation. He needs an agent. Mom said, well, gee whiz, I don't know, how to deal with that and where. And the woman said, well, my name is Lola Moore, and I am the #1 child agent in Hollywood, and I will represent your son. Mom says, well, how much is this going to cost us? Because I have to talk to my husband. She said, it won't cost you anything. I just take 10% of whatever your son makes. And Mom said, yeah, I think my husband would agree. And she said, well, this is all great, but I want to meet Jane Wyman. And she said, don't worry about it. So long story short, Mom takes me on this audition to get a woman's autograph, an actress's autograph. I end up getting a job, getting an agent, and then that started the ball rolling. And then that movie was called So Big with Jane Wyman and Sterling Hayden. My next movie was The Country Girl with Bing Crosby and Grace Kelly, which she won the Academy Award that year. And guys, the first two, I don't remember. I was, the first movie I was not quite 3 years old. The second movie I was 3. Then my third movie, I remember that was called The Day They Gave Babies Away, or another title was All Mine to Give. And
wait a minute, Jon, you were in All Mine to Give?
Yes, with Glynis Johns was my mother, and I can't remember who the father was. I can see him right now, but I can't think of his name. Yes, I was the little boy. If you remember the story, when they were immigrants, and she had to give they had to give the children because they couldn't take care of them. Well, I was in the boat room when she had the baby, and I told my father, I said, no, that's when they have, a girl or a boy or whatever it was. But, that was my third movie.
No, I'm sorry to be surprised, but that's my mom's all-time favorite Christmas movie. And back in the 90s, I went on a hunt to, this is pre-internet, I was on a hunt to find that to surprise her for Christmas one year.
Oh,
and
wow. Cool
ended up finding it in some weird, we're in Milwaukee, in some weird store in downtown Milwaukee. And when you just said that, I was like, whoa, that is so weird. I did not know that. So
I was one of one of the kids, and and then it just led to a couple more, and then I had a contract with RKO for 5 movies, of which the last movie was Escapade in Japan, which got me into the Lassie series. One thing, let me just point out, the Escapade in Japan, we filmed that. It was the first American movie filmed in Japan after World War II.
Wow.
It was just about 11 years after the war ended, and it was when Howard Hughes still owned RKO and TWA, Trans World Airlines. So the whole crew, the cast, all of the equipment, everything was flown over to Japan. I spent 3.5 months there when I was 6 years old. Well, of course, my mom was with me. But it's a really, really hard movie to find. It was considered a bridge movie. They were trying to bring the two countries back together. And the story was about a young American boy who went down in a plane crash, was in the ocean, was found by a Japanese fishing family, and he and this little Japanese boy went throughout the country trying to find my parents. And so it's really a great movie, a touching movie, but and it was just before Howard Hughes sold RKO to Desi and Lucy. And then it became Desi Lou, and that's where we filmed Lassie.
And did you have any run-ins with Lucille Ball?
I saw her. They had I think, 2, maybe 3 different lots. One was in Culver City, and Desi ran that lot. Lucy ran the RKO lot, the Hollywood lot, Desi Lou. And I would see her, but I never met her. No, and that's actually they filmed My 3 Sons there. They filmed the Lucy show there. I knew little Ricky, Keith Thibodeau. We were friends, and of course, Stan and Barry Livingston and those guys from My 3 Sons. But that's where we filmed almost all of Lassie.
Okay. You did 100 and, if I'm right, how many did we say, Brian, of episodes of Lassie? Oh, 250.
Okay, you ready? 249 half-hour episodes. I never did fall in a well.
We weren't going to
and-
ask you that, even though your book is named that.
That book is, yes. Well, everybody says that. All the late-night talk shows. Really, like Colbert, like at least once a week there's some kind of, what is it? Shit, Timmy must have fallen in a well. But, it never happened. And when Lori and I wrote my autobiography, luckily my mother saved every script. So, and the beginning, the very first page of every script was a short synopsis of, what the story, that episode is about. So we went through every single one. Other people fell in a well. There was one episode, some bad guys, and of course, Timmy and Lassie saved them. I fell off cliffs, into abandoned mine shafts, into culverts, into quicksand, which, I don't think is real, but who knows. Into lakes, and you name it, but no, Timmy never did fall in a well.
It's funny.
But everybody, like I said, it'll follow me. It follows me forever.
It's funny. I think I talked to Stephen Talbot, who played Gilbert on Leave It to Beaver, and he had a part on Lassie as well. And
he worked on a couple, as did I can't think of his name right now. Okay, but
Ken
tell me
Osmond.
about Stephen.
Ken Osmond was on a couple of Lassies.
For sure.
And I believe...
we had a lot of people, that were just, pretty much starting out, were on Lassie. One that I remember was Ted Knight. He went on to the Mary Tyler Moore and all that. He was a great comedian. And Ted, he played a ventriloquist, but instead of a dummy, a mannequin, his was a dog. And Lassie thought, but, of course, it wasn't. But, no, a lot of people worked on Lassie. Unfortunately, when I was doing Lassie, I was not allowed to work on other shows.
Right.
So, yeah, that's just the way it was in the contract.
So in 7 seasons of Lassie, how many dogs were there? You mentioned that you had to get along with the first dog. Did they ever replace the dog along the way?
Yes. For one thing, we only had one real Lassie, at a time. We didn't have 4 dogs on the set doing different things. In my 7 years, I worked with 3 different Lassies.
Okay.
The first dog had worked with Tommy. He had worked for 3 years already, and he was old. He was ready to be retired. His nickname was the Old Man. So my first year, I worked with him. The second year, his son took over, and all Lassies were male. And every Lassie is a direct descendant from the very first Lassie, which was in the movie Lassie Come Home with Elizabeth Taylor and Roddy McDowall. So anyway, my second year, I worked with the third Lassie, and we had an accident on the set. Nobody was hurt. We were filming a scene. Nobody got hurt. But the dog, Lassie, got spooked by it because a big lamp fell and almost hit him, but it didn't. But, it scared him. So whenever we were in a situation that was similar, another scene that was similar to that, he would start to get nervous. So Red said, this isn't going to work. So his son took over. And so now I'm with 3, and this is my second year. The last dog for 5 years. So the same dog. I grew up with him, and he grew up with me. I loved that dog. He loved me. We did everything together. We ate together. We slept together. We played together. We worked together. But if I told him to do something, he'd look at me and say, you're my friend, but you're not my trainer. and seriously, it had to be that way because he would be distracted if somebody else was giving a command or something like that. But his name was Baby, and I loved that dog. He was my favorite.
Would you take him home on weekends and stuff? You said you slept with him.
Yeah, no. I could go home with him, but back then they were insured for $1 million, which was now that's like $10 million. But no, I would go home with Rudd and go to his ranch. I mentioned earlier he had a ranch, a 60-acre ranch, about an hour from L.A. and had a lake on it and stuff. So I would go home with him sometimes, just to get out of Hollywood and have fun but it was also a really good way for me and the dog to bond. Mm-hmm. And of course he had his other dogs out there, for breeding and stuff. But we just, like I said, we spent a lot of time together and working. I mean, when I was working, it was 5 days a week, 10 hours a day. And when I say we slept together, sometimes Lassie had a mat, a big on rollers. So in between scenes, he would go and lay down on this padded mat, and it was really big. It was probably like 5 by 5 feet. And sometimes I would lay on the mat with the dog, and fall asleep when I was tired. So you never knew.
Brian mentioned before about some famous people that he remembered being on Lassie. Do you remember having famous co-stars come on the show guest stars that you remember?
Well, like I said, like Ted Knight was on Rip Torn. He played a bad guy. We had a lot of different people, but I think that's pretty close. And a lot of a lot of other kid actors, would do Lassie, as you mentioned before. One was, I mentioned, My Three Sons was filmed on the same lot. Well, Stan Livingston, he played, he was a double for me on one of our episodes where I was supposed to be swimming in a lake, and they didn't want me to do it, and Stan was a really good swimmer, and I think it was actually before he got the job on My Three Sons.
Interesting. Okay. I'm writing that down because we have Stan Livingston coming up on a future interview, so that'll be fun to get his version of events.
Stan's a great guy, and here's a little trivia.
Yeah.
He actually introduced me to my wife Lori. I was this was at it was at the Hollywood show, which was it was like 20 it's about 26 years ago, 27 years ago, and it was before the Comic Cons and those things. They were called autograph shows, and they were in Hollywood, and I was there, and I was Stan was next to me, and and this lady came over, a girl, and Lori was selling one of her books on Hollywood there, and she knew Stan. So she came over and was talking to Stan, and I kind of was kicking him under the table to hey, introduce me. So he finally did, and that's how we met.
That's kind of funny.
And and we just had our 24th anniversary on the 28th of March.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, thank you.
Brian's got some more Lassie questions, but I have one that fans are curious about. We, Google all of our guests on the show, and there was a long period of time, pretty much from 1970 up until the show got renewed, called The New Lassie, where you came back aboard to be the father in the show. What did you do for those 19 years? What did you decide? You walked away from film. You were doing films before that.
Right.
Where were you for 19 years?
Well, what happened was after Lassie, and on Lassie, I wrote my own pink slip. I had a 7-year contract with a 3-year option, and the 7 years were coming up to, and luckily the option was ours. And I turned 14. I was going through puberty. I was like, more getting interested in girls. But everybody thought of me as this little kid with the dog. So my parents came and said, I want you to do the show for 3 more years. And I said, no, I can't. I just don't want to be Timmy. I want to do other stuff because I enjoyed acting. And so my parents said, okay, fine. If you want to quit Lassie, quit. And so I did. And the first thing I started after that was Mr. Ed. So I went from the smartest dog to the smartest horse. And then movies, and I did 3 more movies. This Property is Condemned with Robert Redford, Natalie Wood, Charles Bronson, and Mary Badham. She played, she was Natalie's younger sister, and she was Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird. And then did another movie with Gary Merrill in the Philippines called The Secret of the Sacred Forest, which no one has ever seen, and you're lucky. Everybody's got to make a really bad movie. Well, that was mine. It was so much fun. I was 17 in the Philippines for 3 months, had a great time, but the movie really sucked. Then I come back to L.A. and got a Disney movie with Kurt Russell. The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes. And one day while we were filming the show at lunch, and it was March the 12th, and I turned 18 years old. And Kurt had just had his birthday, and he had just turned 17, and we're sitting there at lunch, and I go, Kurt, I just turned 18. I said, I've been working 15 years. I said, maybe I should take a break. And Kurt said, yeah, I think you should take a break. And that's what I did. And so I left L.A., I went to college. I moved up to Northern California where I went to college at Sonoma State in Sonoma County. And I met my first wife up here. I was in the real estate business for 20 years. And during that time, and then, a couple children, and then during that time, the new Lassie thing came up.
Right.
And, and that was really strange because I heard about it through the grapevine, I'm up here in Northern California, about an hour north of San Francisco. And so I heard that, hey, this guy, producer Al Burton, which I knew his name, is doing a new Lassie series. So I called them. And the thing he said to me was, now I just want to let you know, I'm not going to use anybody from the old Lassie show. I said, okay. I said, that's fine. I said, but what about behind the camera? A consultant or whatever, a writer, whatever. And he says, oh, well, that could be interesting. So we arranged a lunch. I went down to L.A. and we had lunch. And over our lunch, he decided that, well, now maybe I can use you in the series. So, but you're not Timmy.
Well, of course not. You don't want a 30-year-old Timmy.
No, Lord. And I'm just thinking in my head, wait a minute. He's doing the new Lassie series. I'm going to be in it, but I'm not Timmy. Okay, we'll see how this goes. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. The other people in the show, Wendy Cox and the Dee Wallace and her husband. It was a lot of fun, but they weren't doing it the way Lassie should be. And the second season, Al Burton, the producer, he let Bob Weatherwax, who had the 8th generation Lassie, do stories. And I submitted one story, which they did accept, and we did one episode, and it was called The Rabbit's Tale. And it was about using rabbits in chemical testing for, cosmetics, for, women's eyeliner, things like that. And that episode won the Genesis Award that year for Best Family TV Series, and for protection of the animals. So I was really proud of that. But one thing we did, and out the second season, was use a lot of people from the old Lassie show. Tommy Reddick. Tommy did an episode. Roddy McDowell did an episode, and Margaret O'Brien. We tried to get Elizabeth Taylor, but she wouldn't do one. So it was fun, but and we got canceled after the 2 years. But it was a lot of fun.
Were you glad you did it, or was that something you regret going back to?
Oh no, it was no. I enjoyed it, and the way it was set up. I was kind of an extended part of the nucleus family, and so I was in every third, fourth episode. So I would just, like once a month, I'd just fly down to LA for a week, do an episode, and then come back home. So it was great. I had a lot of fun. And I have to say, there was one young man that was kind of discovered. His very first major show, a TV show, was The New Lassie, and it was a young man by the name of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh,
Ever heard of that guy?
I think
Unfortunately, he did an episode that I wasn't in, so I didn't get to meet him, and I haven't met him yet. But yeah, maybe someday.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So we were talking about Stephen Talbot earlier and what happened with him with the animals. Now, he had said that anyone that worked on Lassie had to have a medical exam because they were working with animals. Now, did you go through this medical exam, and was there any other?
That's the first I've heard of that. No,
really?
that's the first I've heard of that.
And was there any other incidents with any of the animals other than the one that I just brought up earlier?
Well, we worked with everything, you name it. I mean, from A to Z. Really, we worked with alligators. We worked with ostriches. I mean, emus. You name it. We worked with it. Well, a couple times we worked with chimpanzees, and chimps aren't the best. And unfortunately, this one that we worked with, he was an old circus chimpanzee, and he was old, and his trainer was really, he looked like he was right out of the circus. I mean, he had one of those English pith helmets on, and he carried a gun that had blanks in it. And we worked for it took 3.5 days to shoot 1/2 hour. And so the 3.5 days were up, and I'd worked with his chimp, no problems at all. And I'm going home, and he's sitting on a chair, and I just said, "Okay, bye, nice working with you," and touched him on his head. Well, which I had done before, and he grabbed my hand, put my thumb in his mouth, and proceeded to chew it off. Well, I'm screaming, blood is going, and his trainer pulls out this gun and shoots it in the air and with the blanks, and of course it scared the chimp, and then he let go of me. And then I still have the scars on the hand today on my thumb, but they rushed me down to the infirmary and sewed me up, and everything was fine. But that was the only animal incident that I had. Of course, Lassie, never bit me or anything. So.
And did your mom ever want to sue the animal trainer?
I don't think so. No, hey, it was just maybe that was it. Maybe when people were on the show, they had to sign some kind of a medical waiver that if they were attacked by Lassie or one of the animals, they couldn't sue the studio. I don't know. Maybe that was it.
Yeah. Well, that's a long time ago. So.
Oh yeah, and seriously, I saw good trainers and bad trainers and of different kind of animals, and when we'd have other dogs on, it would be another trainer, and just to see how they would treat their animals as opposed to Red Weather Wax, he was great. I learned a lot from him.
Now, I'm always curious about child stars. First of all, the fact that you go around and you're on television and you're walking around in grocery stores, and who knows what your school experience was like. Were you ever not happy that you were a public figure on television because of the attention that you garnered for being on TV?
Sure, especially when you're young, because I'm working 5 days a week doing the show. I'm 12 years old, or I'm 10 years old. Well, let's say I'm 12. And me and my buddy, who's not in the business, I had a couple, good friends,
Regular
in the
people
neighborhood.
friends, yeah.
People friends, exactly. So we'd want to go to a matinee on a Saturday. Well, we'd go, and all of the other kids would say, "Oh my God, look, it's Timmy! Oh my God, And well, you're not supposed to be. I mean, I had kids come up to me and say, "You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be on the farm." Or seriously, or because they saw me every Sunday when the show, and then now here it is, and there I am, a real person, and we didn't have paparazzi, so it wasn't crazy like that, and if we went out to dinner as a family. Sometimes people would come over, but normally they would, wait until you were done with your meal or something. Today, it's a whole nother story. I mean, you can't do anything. If somebody wants, your photo or whatever, they'll go to whatever means they think they have to go to.
Right. And were your parents fiscally responsible with your earnings? Like, did you feel things were squandered, or did you feel like you were taken care of adequately?
No, my father supported the family, not like a lot of other, kids that were, in my generation in the business. I think it got worse later on, where kid gets a job, the father becomes the manager, the mother becomes something, and then they're on the salary, but they're just taking the kid's money because
Right.
In California we have a law. It's called the Coogan Law. When Jackie Coogan, who made millions, when he turned 21, he didn't have a penny because his parents, had squandered all his money. So they passed the Coogan Law, and 1/3 of your earnings is taken and put into account by the state, and the parents can't touch that. The other 2/3 they can do as whatever they want with. They can, use it for themselves now my father, like I said, he supported the family, so he put my money in the bank.
Nice.
Now, it was nice. Not like the salaries they make today.
No.
But we don't get residuals. I haven't gotten a last residual in 50 years. The show's on in over 50 countries in reruns. It's on in a dozen different cable, networks or whatever. But it's not just Lassie. It's most of those shows, of the late 50s, early 60s, nobody gets residuals.
Now, most people don't know this. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, and that came about because when Ronald Reagan, at one time before he was president of the United States, was president of the Screen Actors Guild. And the issue of residuals came up because new series now were, they were getting residuals for 10 years. We only got residuals for 3 runs, so they could show it 3 times, and then after that they could show it as much as they wanted. So it came across his desk, and Ron decided that if you made a series before 1964, you got nothing. If you made a series after 64, then you got residuals in perpetuity. So your great-grandchildren are going to be getting, your money. So I don't know why he, did that, but he just, really put the axe to a bunch of all the early shows.
And of course, Lassie ended in 1964, so that's
right,
not good
me.
for you.
And then it went on, in different.
Oh, of course,
see,
yeah.
That was it too. Why did they get? I think they made a big mistake when they got rid of the family when we left, because like when Tommy left, he gave Lassie to Timmy. Well, Timmy could have given Lassie to another kid, or a girl, a boy, a girl, doesn't matter. it's a kid and a dog, not a forest ranger and a dog. And and then they went on to cartoons and different things. So I think it was always best, with the family.
Oh yeah, and most people don't know this, but Lassie started out as a radio show in the 1940s. Now, you were like extremely young, infant young, when these were out, but have you ever had the chance to listen to those episodes?
It's amazing you brought that up. Oh, it must have been about 10, maybe 15 years ago. I was in New York, and it was for an old-time radio convention. And a guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, did you know they did Lassie Radio?" I go, "You're kidding?" He said, "Yeah, because they did 5 Lassie movies. Then before TV, they did the radio." And I said, "No." I said, "It's the first time I've ever heard of it." And he goes, "Oh yeah." So I actually have some copies. I was given some copies. And Red Weatherwax, he is, he's the beginning. I guess he, tells what the story's about. And they did evidently have Lassie in the booth to bark. So, I mean, that is crazy. But it's amazing you brought that up because, I was totally ignorant of it for years. Never knew.
So now I know trainers are involved with this, but Lassie always had like a whine, like a sympathy whine or a I love you whine. You know what I mean?
Right.
So was that the actual dog making that sound, or did they get that sound somewhere else?
Well, when we were filming, no. The only thing Lassie would do would bark. That the whining and stuff they added later on, and I don't know, who it was or if it was a dog or a person. I don't know because we never did. Lassie would always bark on cue. And that was the thing. Rudd, he was the main trainer, but he also had one of his 2 sons would be an assistant trainer, and then he had his number 1 trainer. So there were always 3 trainers on set, and 50% of Lassie's instructions were verbal, and 50% were hand signals. Like barking was a hand signal. Or laying down or doing certain things, but sometimes you would, it would be a verbal command. So the actors, and we knew this ahead of time, when we would rehearse, and so we knew when Rudd or one of his trainers was going to give a verbal command, so we had to space our dialogue so we wouldn't overlap with the trainer, because they didn't want to have to go back and redub it. They were just trying to save money. So we had to be conscious of what the dog what was going to happen with him, his command, and with our dialogue on top of it. So it was a lot of work.
I have a question about Mr. Ed. Can you pull back? Because many fond memories watching all of these shows with my dad, who just loved classic television.
All right.
I've heard stories that they used fishing line to make Mr. Ed talk and different things like that. What was your experience working on Mr. Ed? Were you curious about how that whole talking thing was going to go before you went on the show? And tell me about your, times on the set.
Well, I knew a lot of the tricks with what they did with animals. Like I said, we worked if Lassie was fighting a wolf, it was a German Shepherd, made up to look like a wolf, and when they would be growling and just showing all the teeth, they would take a rubber band and put it up above their top lip, and then it would go around the back of their head, so it would pull their lip up so it looked like they were always growling. And when these dogs were fighting, if you watch them, their tails were wagging. They're just playing, So the Mr. Ed thing, peanut butter or whatever, it was the fishing line. That's
okay.
what, and it was wrapped around him, and then the trainer was behind him, and he would just tug on it, and it would, I think he learned so that once he had that little tug, then he would move his mouth. But he was great, and Alan Young, every day before they went to the studio, Alan and Ed would go for a ride.
Ah.
He would ride Ed every day before they went to work. He would go to the stables where Ed lived, and so I always thought that was great.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing. It's like me and Lassie. I mean, that, like I said, I worked with Baby for 5 years. We had that bond. We really did, and he had that bond with Mr. Ed. And you can always see it, because you can't fake it. You can fake it with another actor, but you can't fake it with an animal, because they know.
Anything?
Yeah. The now we've talked about Jeff's collie before, but I'm just wondering, they only had 3 seasons with him. Now, he got to the point where he got older, kind of like you did. He got older and he wanted to move on. Now, it was kind of weird, and again, you kind of touched on it about passing the dog on to another little boy. So they only went 3 seasons with one family, and then they went from the Millers to the Martins.
Mm-hmm.
So was this something I imagine Jeff, Tommy Reddick, I imagine he went to the producers and he said, I'm not interested in doing this anymore. So, how did do you know how they cooked that all up, or did you hear anything at one point?
I know, yeah. Tommy, when he started, he started 14. I started when I was 7. And, he was 17, and that was it. He just wanted out. And I don't know, how he was contractually involved. But maybe they started out with a 3-year contract. I know with me, the first 3 years, they could drop you immediately, and there's nothing you could do. I mean, you basically, you go home on a Friday, and Monday you come back to the studio, and the guards won't let you on the lot. I mean, that happens, But like I said, with us, it was the 7-year, and then with the 3-year option. So I'm not for sure, but Tommy and I, we're 10 years apart, and of course, Tommy's passed. He died very young, but he and I became friends later on in life when I was more of an adult, and when I was living where I am now in Northern California. When I would go to L.A., I would always try to see Tommy, and he lived down in the marina, and we'd go out to dinner and do something like that. But every time when I was done, or even a phone call, I would always end it with "Thanks for the dog, Jeff."
Oh yeah.
And he loved it too. It was great because thanks for the dog. But they, it's just it was just the transition, from the one family to the other, and he left. He went away to college, and he gave me Lassie, and then his mom, Jan Clayton, she didn't have a husband, so now she's on the farm with Gramps, and this little boy and a dog, and that's it. And then Gramps died, so now she's stuck. So she had to sell the farm, and when she sold the farm, the kid and the dog came, the tractor came, the truck came with it. That was part of the deal.
When Tommy appeared on that new Lassie, he was on for one episode. Were you on with him? Were you guys ever on screen together?
I think we were. I'm trying to, I don't really recall.
That's okay.
I don't recall.
I just noticed he was on an episode, and I thought, ooh, that's kind of a neat moment if you had appeared on screen at the same time.
Yeah, I think we, that's one I don't have episodes that I can look at because they haven't syndicated because it's only I think they need 3 years to syndicate, and so they don't have enough episodes.
Oh yeah.
But I'm sure at some point you'll see them. And you mentioned Jeff Cawley. Well, it wasn't Jeff Cawley. It was called, when he did the series, it was called Lassie.
Okay.
And then once I started, when they started to show reruns of Tommy, they had to change the name to Jeff Cawley because they figured, oh, wait a minute. People are, they're thinking of Lassie, they think of Timmy and Lassie. So if we have now people that have never seen him before are going to be really confused. So they changed it to Jeff Cawley.
Okay, yeah. So tell us a little bit about Hugh Riley and June Lockhart. What was it like working with them?
They were great. And Lord, June, June is going to be 98 this year.
Wow.
We have kept in touch over the years. Unfortunately, Hugh, he passed away quite a few years ago. He was a heavy smoker. And I mentioned the Hollywood shows that we did, the autograph shows. It was out at the Beverly Garland Theater the Beverly Garland Hotel out in the Valley, and Hugh lived about 3 blocks from there. And so I contacted Hugh. He was bedridden. He had emphysema. He was a very heavy smoker, and it finally got to him. But I told him about the show, and he said, John, I'd really love to get out. I'd really love to do that. So we got him to do the Hollywood show. It was the only autograph show he ever did, and he loved it, and the people loved meeting him, and he was the kindest man. He was the guy you saw on the show. That was Hugh. That's how he was. And so he did the one autograph show, and then he wanted to do the next one, which was, like 4 months later or something, but he passed before that happened. But he was a great guy. And June, June was super. Yes, a little bit of a diva, but that's okay. She was, she wasn't like a lot of others, but no, June was great. June was always a lot of fun. I knew both of her daughters, still do. Back in the day, we didn't have a swimming pool, but they had a swimming pool, and so some would go over there and hang out. But June is amazing, and and then she left the farm and got lost in space, so she was doing great.
Now, was there an actor that you looked up to as a child?
That's been asked a lot, and I started out so young,
right?
And I didn't know anything, and my parents weren't show business people at all, so I didn't have any of that. But so when I was in the makeup room, these big actors, like Jesse White, or I don't know who, just Robert Redford, Natalie Wood. And that's a different story. I was older then, but I just looked at them as people that do the same thing I do. We're here, we're doing a job. I admired people, but it's like I don't know. It was just different because it was just what it was just what I did, and they did the same thing. Now, one time, I was really put on the spot. I was about 10, maybe 11, 10 and a half, something like that. We were at having lunch at the Paramount commissary, when Paramount was right next door to RKO, well, to Desilu. And they had a better commissary, so sometimes we'd go there for lunch. And Bob Hope was filming one of his road movies or something there, and he was having lunch, and somebody got it into their head, oh, this is going to be a great photo op. So they took Timmy and they put him on Bob Hope's lap, and he looked at, and I'm like 10 and a half years old, and he looked at me and he said, okay, kid, make me laugh. Yeah, right. Yeah, I knew who Bob Hope was, and so I had lost my 2 front teeth, and they had built or had a dentist make a bridge because they couldn't have Timmy without teeth, for continuity. And so I said, oh, wait, I've got these false teeth in my mouth. So I took my false teeth out, and it cracked Bob Hope up. And I got a great photo of it, and about of him looking at me with like this crazy look on his face. And about 15, 20 years later, maybe even longer than that, I was able to get him to autograph the photograph, and so I've got it in the hallway, so it's cool.
That's awesome.
That is so cool. Well, I got my last question here. Your autobiography is going to be re-released. Timmy's in a Well, which he was.
As a matter of fact, it already is.
Cool.
As let's see, March the 8th, it was released again, and yes, it originally came out in 2008. A lot has transpired. I've done a few, had parts in some independent movies. I am the voice of a robot in a new science fiction movie that is actually coming out right now. It's called Colonials, and I am the voice of Spark the robot.
Cool.
So it just goes on and on. You know, if the phone rings and somebody wants, you want to do this? Yeah, if it sounds like it'd be interesting, why not?
Very cool. So how can someone get a copy of your book?
They can just go to, Amazon, of course, or brick and mortar, or they can go, if they would like a signed copy, they can just go to my website, which is jonprovost.com, JONPROVOST, and they can look at one there. And plus, on my website, I still do a lot of appearances and things like that, and so it'll, things are listed there and photographs and what have you. But we added about 100 pages to the book, and a lot more, some new photographs and stuff. So it is kind of interesting when you read it. Then you know the rest of my story.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Very cool, yeah.
Well, thank you, Jon, so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
We know that you'd probably do a lot of these long-form interviews where you're talking about the same show, the same stories, but hopefully we came up with a few questions that entertained you a little bit.
You did. Thank you so much. No, hey, listen, it's all, and every time I think of something different, or it's, oh, wait a minute, that sparked a memory of something. So I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So there it was, Jon Provost. Brian, good booking, man. For a guy who I thought, well, you brought Jon on the show, and he's got Timmy, and he did some exciting things, and I was really interested in hearing about the Mr. Ed stuff. Wasn't quite sure like how long it would be, because for somebody who's mostly known for one show. But the guy's done a ton of stuff. I was surprised.
Yeah, and that Christmas movie, that was kind of a shock to you, hey?
Well, it was, because my mom loves this movie, and just finding it on DVD now is easier than it was. But even still, it's kind of a challenge because it's not widely known about and distributed.
So now the next time you watch it, you're going to be looking for him.
Oh, I will definitely look for him. But my mom's got the video, so now I have to wait to watch it with her.
Nice.
All right. Well, Brian, I hope that we are together again soon for another wonderful interview. And it's been a pleasure being with you again.
It's always a pleasure, Nick. Thank you.
All right. All right. We'll. All right. Until next time, it's Nick Bailey and Brian Nelson Jr. saying good night.
So long.